by the Shadows is the fourth full-length album from Norwegian black metal band Trelldom. Now, we could debate what is black metal and what is not. I think that if you're more of a classics-minded person, there's nothing on this record upfront that is absolutely black metal at all. It doesn't sound like the classic 90s black metal that we'd always gotten from Trelldom in the 90s and intermittently beyond that point. Now, this is as a group that started back in the early 90s, of course, by way of vocalist, actor, artist, and sommelier Gal, a figure who is both a meme for some people, but also a very serious artist for most others. He put quite a lot of work into this band early on before he had joined Gorgoroth in the late 90s. He was much better known for that band for the about 10 years that he was in that group. But for me, I'd always known him for Till Evighet. This was the first album from the band. It's more of a raw and straightforward type of black metal. It was kind of more in the Bergen style compared to his first demo, where it was a little bit of a pagan black metal feeling to it. There were acoustic moments. There was kind of unique vocal style applied to it, but it was more about the guitar sound, the interjections of the guitarists. It was a very strong album overall. And then later on, there were follow-ups that were better received. They involved producer and engineer Pitten, so they had a certain sound that was important in the late 90s to a lot of people, and the popularity of Gorgoroth and his presence in that band all came together for Till It and it being a popular album, and as well as the follow-up to it, which was kind of what I felt like Till Min was, to me, it was like an impersonation of Till It on it, returning to that sound again. It was 10 years later, but 10 years removed, and it involved more of these signature vocal styles of Gall, which were outlandish, and they were already a swarm of shrieking ghosts on that second album, and they'd gone in a little bit more of a straightforward direction on 2007. So they were reinforcing what people coming from Gorgoroth might have expected. It wasn't that interesting of an album to me, but it was a little bit more varietal. You could see that there was different songwriters involved. You could see there was different types of guitar work involved, and it was kind of interesting at the time. So what are we getting now here so many years later? We've got different people involved in the overall end product. The bassist of the band now, who's been in for quite a long time, is kind of leading a lot of the songwriting, and there have been a lot of detours for Gall for his own directed projects. So what is this now? I'm not sure if I can tell you what this is in a clip, but let's call it a jazz fusion infused progressive black metal experience, which is just different than a lot of what you might be expecting from Trelldom today here in 2024. So I believe Stian Karstad, the current guitarist and one of the main collaborative songwriters in this band, was previously the bassist. I believe he wrote some songs in the 2007 album. I think that's kind of where the context connects to the past to the present. But generally, this is nothing necessarily related to that path they were on before. There are elements where I bring up bands like Voivod and Virus and things like that in terms of where some of the movement of the album comes from. But there is an avant-garde composition going into every piece. A lot of these are conceptually set. Some of them are more accessible. They have kind of a bounding groove, and others are very vocally driven by Gall's vocal range. There's a showcase of both the avant-garde side of the band and their instrumental prowess and the professionalism applied to it. There's other pieces that are focused around Gall and his range, and again, showing that off with unique instrumentals behind it, which often have the interjection or just full immersion of the saxophone player Kjetil Moster, who is a very strong addition to this record overall. It's a very unique sound and implementation, which is not typically the John Zorn-esque applications of jazz to black metal that we've heard in the past. If you're expecting something that is similar to Gall's Weird, this is not that. This is much more black metal in the way that its movement is produced. There are dissonant elements all over the place. There's quite a lot of synth in on this album, and so it this is not really anything that you're expecting. And I think that was what was interesting about it to me, is that it's really a progressive metal record with black metal elements and just a little bit of everything else that makes it something ephemeral in some sense, but also very direct up front. If I'm mentioning the Swans on a black, when I'm talking about a black metal album, I think a lot of people just don't really understand what I would mean by that. But you'll understand when you're like about neck deep in this record, you're in side B, and you're looking for context as to what's going on. And I think that's the same feeling I get from some of the more surreal, more recent Swans records. And I think that will apply more naturally once you've listened to it for a while. So it's a fairly short listen at 41 minutes. You'd expect them to go over the top with it. I think it's a very contained listen. It's a bit erratic. There are long instrumental sections, and a lot of this works in terms of being a little bit detached, being a little bit aside from the self. The album is titled By the Shadows, and they are moving in ways that are circuitous, that are different, that are surreal and ominous. And I think that if it was a more vocally driven album, I would have been more connected to it. But there are big bursts of gall up front all over this record, and then there are big, long periods of silence where we generally focus on the instrumental side of things. So it's surreal, it's interesting, it's dark, but it's nothing you would expect from the name Trelldom, if you're familiar with them at all, really. So in some sense, I'm not sure who this record is for. It's people who are interested in the ways that Trelldom were abstract in the past, which were still contained in the 90s black metal vernacular, and then it's something that's pure abstraction in most every other sense. So I think it's a bold choice. It's a unique album, and I don't know how it relates to the Trelldom name other than the unit that's behind it. But giving free reign for just whatever happens on this record leads to a very strong result. It's memorable. It's got some very interesting action overall if you're interested in different progressive isms in black metal and the dark waves that it emits. So for me, a very entertaining experience. It's an album that I liked quite a bit. It is above average, but it's still more of a moderately high recommendation. I don't think this is for everyone, and I think a lot of black metal purists who are looking for the Trelldom name to sound a certain way won't really understand what this is. So if you are maybe on the more open-minded side as to what this can be, as I am, I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was just something that was very unique this month, and I think that it stands out here when I consider everything that was released in September that I've had access to. So that released on September 13th. Again, that's a moderately high recommendation for me. Check it out for yourself and see what you think, and read my review if you'd like more of my thoughts.